The field fold can be simplified in this way, and it is a circular swastika, and it is from this symbol that the swastika, as we have come to know it unfortunately, on a massive level through National Socialism or the Nazis, and then everything that Hitler did comes from. But contrary to what most people think, the swastika has absolutely no negative meaning whatsoever. It is a very ancient symbol too, and has a meaning of dynamism. In fact, it is a positive symbol. Even especially in the Eastern religions, it is a symbol of good luck. Therefore, since Hitler was a great esotericist, from Himmler to the most important leaders of the SS, which we will get into later because it also linked to them, this discourse that we are dealing with today. The swastika was used by Hitler because it has a meaning of dynamic power, a positive meaning. So what does the crop circle tell us? But first I want to give you two historical notes. For example, here we see the field on a Danish gold brooch from the 5th century AD, or on a Chinese vase. Here it is. I don't know if you can spot it. It's quite evident, from 3000 BC. And this is a symbol that is more than 5,000 years old, and that has appeared on the other occasions in the crop circles. This is a field that appeared in England on 22nd of July 1998, so even in crop circles the symbol tends to repeat itself because over time the discourse that is manifested through the crop circles is amplified. It is interconnected in order to give an increasingly in-depth message. I will also show you a logo, which is the logo of the Thule Society, to which the Nazi hierarchs, including Hitler, belonged. The Thule Society was in reality created in 1919, therefore when Hitler was still an unknown person, and derives from another Germanic group that was actually constituted in 1912, thanks above all to an esotericist named Guido von List. Both the Germania Orden, as it was called, and the Thule Society used the circular swastika, which would later become the hooked swastika, typical of the Nazism. But the hooked swastika is also a well-known symbol from antiquity and is found in various fields. Here we have a Buddha, you see, wearing it on his chest, and a Iraqi bowl from 7,000 years ago, even a mosaic in the destroyed city of Herculaneum, along with Pompeii in 79 AD, and an Etruscan gold pendant. You see the swastikas here from 700 BC, so the swastika is a symbol of good luck and a symbol of dynamic power. But we also find it extraordinarily in the extraterrestrial realm, even before crop circles were born. For example, when the American contact maker George Adamski met on November 1952 with this being who introduced himself under the name Orton. At a certain point, Orton, in the first meeting, makes a sign to Adamski. In the first meeting, they did not speak. They understood each other by gestures, and since Adamski was a scholar of Oriental religions, he also used telepathy, that is, the transmission of thought images. And the extraterrestrial made George Adamski understand that he wanted a roll of film from Adamski's camera, which he was carrying. Adamski gave it to him, and on December 13, about 2 weeks later, a little more than 2 weeks later, Orton, in his flying saucer, flew over Adamski's house and put the film from the porthole, gave it back to him. Adamski took the film to have it developed, and in the film appeared this very strange symbol with all these. I think they are letters of an extraterrestrial language. Well, you can see that in the symbol that surely indicates the flying saucer. There is in the center, here I reported in a large size, there is a swastika with the solar wheel in the center. So probably in this case, the swastika indicates the type of energy with which the flying saucers move. Actually, during the first meeting, the being at a certain point, since they met in Arizona desert, moves the pebbles that were on the ground and discovers the sand that was under the first layer of the pebbles and treads forcefully on the sand, signaling to Adamski that this fact was very important. When that creature then leaves with the flying saucer, I also remember that were several witnesses at Adamski meeting with Orton. Witnesses who then gave a signed testimony and deposited by the notary. Therefore, Adamski was not alone as it happened to Eugenio during the first contact. And also Adamski made the cast of the symbols left impressed on the sand by the soul of the extraterrestrial. And also in the soul of the extraterrestrial there was the swastika and the symbol of Gerald contraction which concerns the theory of relativity, which was probably a fact related to the stellar flight. So also in the extraterrestrial sphere, you see, we find the swastika, but not only Adamski, but also Eugenio Siragusa, who, as I said, in April 1962, had the first meeting with the extraterrestrials. He received a message where the swastika was present. Attached to the message was this diagram, and you can see here the swastika. In fact, the message attached speaks of a genetic intervention by extraterrestrials to graft into human DNA a new non-corruptible genetics, as unfortunately DNA genetics have proved to be. And they call this new genetics GNA. Corruptible, I'm not saying in terms of disease, and therefore in biological terms, but corruptible from an ethical point of view. That is, those who carry these genetics have a greater or even absolute inability to corrupt themselves. That is to say, beings who carry these genetics are incorruptible. So when the generation occurs in a society, those who carry these genetics oppose it. They cannot adapt to a degenerative situation. Among other things, in the communique that I will now read to you and in the subsequent information that will arrive from Eugenio and Giorgio, the extraterrestrial explained that these genetics can also be acquired by ordinary people who do not carry them simply by following their works, that is, by living a life in the same way as those who carry GNA genetics live. So in fact the values of Christian ethics. And this is the message. GNA Genetics message of 4 January 1977. In reality, what are called kidnappings have this purpose. They are not kidnappings. They are abductions, because people are taken, they are treated, let's say, and then brought back home without suffering any damage, but over time they develop characteristics of superior sensitivity to ethical issues, which they then put into practice in activities of various kinds and types in the social sphere. So it's not just a matter of sharing positive values. It's a matter not only of sharing, but also of setting up an operational approach to one's life. This is what the message says. Haven't you been told that you are in the world and not of the world? Your genetic information structure is not DNA, but GNA, cosmic genetics owned by the Titans, the coordinators of the creative idea. Observe well the following graph that I have shown you, and studied it seriously and deeply. 7,465,006 is the number of those destined to have DNA genetics, that is to say, our genetics that are certainly not of this world. Do not be surprised and do not regret if you are rejected by those who possess DNA genetics. The material evolutionary dynamic in an ascending phase is the result of the spiritual dynamic in an ascending phase projected beyond the primordial creative values ABCD. With the development of DNA genetics, your consciousness is pushed outside of CD consciousness, which is the animal man, assuming substantially different characteristics and manifesting spiritual, material, and moral qualities in contrast with the CD that is with materialistic man. Your history is weaved by flows and reflections not certainly understandable by the lowest capacity of intelligence, bounded by primordial creative and organizational values, and by all other political, scientific, religious, and moral values that are in the initial evolutional correspondent, that is the beast man, let's say. For those who have reached the step of this new genetic activity, understanding this speech of mine is not difficult, although I do not think it's the right time to expand it further. We will be in touch on this subject again. In the meantime, I invite you to study seriously and deeply the graph I have expressed to you. See you soon. Peace. It is the extraterrestrial Adoniasis who is speaking. As I can well imagine, if you are not used to this kind of language, it will be very difficult for you to understand what he means. Basically, the extraterrestrial Adoniasis is telling us that on planet Earth, beings have been born. They are not of this world. In fact, Eugenio later had a very important experience where he was picked up and taken to visit an extraterrestrial orbital station. In one of the rooms of this huge orbital base, Eugenio saw niches on the walls covered with crystals. And inside there were bodies. And Eugenio asked, "What happened to these people who are inside these niches?" And the guide who accompanied him, the extraterrestrial guide, said, "They are our companions who are currently incarnated on Earth. That is, they have a technology whereby they can extract the spirit from a body, insert it into the body of gestating baby, that is, in the womb of the mother, and have it born as an earthling." The extraterrestrial explained to Eugenio that these people can live on Earth for no more than 80 years. So that's the maximum length of their lives, and then when they die, they return to the extraterrestrial body that has been preserved in the spaceships. And Eugenio said, "But how many are there at this moment on Earth?" And the extraterrestrial says to him, "At this moment on your planet there are about 6 million extraterrestrial incarnated." So the speech of that Adoniasis makes refers to these people who are apparently human, but in reality their spirit is not of this world, and therefore they possess genetics of this kind which makes them uncorruptible, and which drives them in absolutely uncontrollable way to work in society for the common good. So it's a great fact, and a very beautiful one, that there are beings from other worlds who sacrifice themselves to live in a society that is certainly not as peaceful as the human one in order to help us out. In other press releases, they will explain that what these people do serves not only to, let's say, directly improve our society, but also to set an example for earthlings, so that, following their example, they too can acquire this particular genetics. Ultimately, this crop circle with the symbols it contains tell us that there will be an expression of a dynamic factor in relation to planet Earth. And this is precisely the pattern of the hollow Earth. So the dynamic factor is indicated both in the inner aspect of the Earth, so the inner sun that is amplifying its energetic emanation at the same time, as the outer sun. It tells us that there is an amplification of the value of the DNA genetics on the physical level. Therefore, it's a scheme of the real nature of the planet, which is to be hollow with a sun in the middle, however, an argument that we will amplify during the presentation, and that there is the symbolized by the fivefold. That is the internal swastika dynamic aspect, because among the prophecies they are linked to the changes that will happen in the near future. There is also the shift of the physical axis of the Earth. That is, the poles will move. Among other things, a new report has come out indicating that due to global warming and the melting of the million stones of the ice at the poles, the North Pole is sliding towards Europe.